like I say, I am thankful to be here. I have to wear my glasses to see, even though I printed real big. I still like to wear my glasses so I can see things real good. Yeah, it's better. Definitely better. So, first of all, some of you guys don't know, but I just want to thank Penny Abbott for starting to come here on Sunday mornings. She's one of my bus mammals, and I haul her two little grandsons to school every day, and she's been coming, and I'm really thankful for that. Of course, Sean and Wesley are part of the People's Football family. They've pretty much made beach work their home, I believe, and so thankful to have friends come and join us. And anyway, I love all you guys. I just can't get over. I feel like we have a closeness in our church family and in our class especially. And I was thinking as I was preparing for this, I love that our Sunday school class ranges from about age, we'll even have 20-year-olds with Elijah when he's here, up to in their 70s. And I know that's kind of odd probably for some churches, but I like it because I feel like, we'll take Elijah, who's one of our youngest, he can look to one of our oldest and say, gosh, if they've been through that, then I can make it through too. I think we have a lot to offer with that, and I think that there's a lot of things that, you know, as a parent of a 19-year-old, I can share with someone who has kids with a 6th grader, like Bo. So I just feel like we're here for each other, and we have to be here for each other through some things. So we all have a lot going on in our lives, because we have such a range of age. We're busy. We're busy people. We're the busiest we've ever been. We have sick babies. We're sending little ones to school. We're helping our elderly parents and trying to adjust to aging ourselves. For those of you who, I'm going to take my glasses on off because I can't see to look at you guys. But for those of you who are in your 30s, 20s, even 40s, enjoy it. Just really enjoy, because people talked about in their 50s and 60s, when I was in my 30s, they talk about, all your things fail and you feel different and you're sick and you think, oh, it won't happen to me. Well, it will. It just will. And it's disappointing, and it's hard, but it's just, we're all going to face that. So we're all heading to the older years unless you die at a young age, and that's just the bottom line. So we are, as a class, we're all balancing our work. We're being parents, even to those who have older kids. Lynn, you're still a parent to Victoria. You're still helping her and guiding her. We all need it. Who does not need their mom? We're getting here and there for different events that we obligate ourselves to. And like last week, I'd obligated myself to several things, and there's only 3 of us bus drivers that are taking trips, and so it's constant. And I'm on the road sometimes 3 or 4 nights a week, in addition to my bus routes. So that means I'm on the road from about 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night some days, and it is tiring and it's overwhelming some days, but we do what we can do, and I just feel like we're helping. And yes, I make extra money, but also if I don't take a bus trip, then sometimes they're not getting to their games, sometimes they're not getting to their events, and I hate that. But last week when I looked at my calendar, I was just like, I've got to get rid of something. And so I got rid of 2 things, and I'm glad I did, because Dad ended up in the hospital. So God knew ahead of time. I told Ted, I said, and he doesn't care, but I said, money is not everything right now. I have to get rid of this trip. I just cannot do it. And so anyway, sometimes we have to eliminate things, and I know that's hard. Along with all the things that we're trying to take care of, and right now, my family and the Wesley family, we're in that stage of seeing that our parents are taken care of, and it's so hard. It is so hard and overwhelming and frustrating and just all those things, but we're all trying to be the best we can be. And then, as Christians, we're trying to be the very best Christian we can be. We're trying to make sure that we're here and we're present and we're doing as much as we can for God. I believe we're the busiest generation to date. I believe that older generations definitely worked harder, worked, labor,
Right.
manual labor. But they surely do not have the distractions that we do today.
Right.
They didn't have, they could go sit on their porch in the evenings and just sit there and drink sweet tea and have all their neighbors come in and make homemade ice cream. I remember that as a kid, seeing my great-grandparents do that, and it was wonderful, and we don't do that anymore. The one thing for sure that we all have in common, though, and even many, many generations back, including Bible, is we've all suffered. The dictionary tells us that suffering is a state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. How many in this class have suffered? We all have. We all can agree we've suffered in some respect. In the Bible term, suffering is anything which hurts or irritates. Again, how many has been hurt or irritated on the daily sometimes, okay? But suffering is also something that makes us think. It just really makes you think. God uses suffering as a tool to make us think, get our attention, and most of all, to accomplish His purposes in our life. So, we've all suffered. There's no getting around it. Mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, through sickness, through caring for children who have been sick from day one, from caring for parents, suffering with cancer. I mean, everybody suffered. And we all could say from age 20 to age 70, we've all suffered and we're going to suffer. But it's going to work for the glory of God most of the time. I think back when my grandpa, a few of you guys know him. I don't know if Kenny knew him, but I know Gary and Linda, Vicki, and Doug, and several remember him. But my grandpa he was just an awesome grandpa. He was the type of grandpa that if Craig or I, we were the only two grandkids, so we pretty much got all the attention. If one of us was sick, he was there. I will never forget one day, I had sprained my ankle playing basketball, and I was standing in the kitchen, leaning on the counter right near the stove, talking to my grandpa, telling him that I sprained my ankle, I wouldn't be able to play the next basketball game, and whatever, and we were standing there talking. I was on the phone, on a cord of the phone, if you can imagine that, and I passed out. And my grandpa just lived a quarter mile, maybe half a mile, I don't know, from our house. And we were talking on the phone. I passed out. I was on the floor, passed out, and when I woke up, my grandpa was standing over me. He knew something had happened. Yep. He had raced down to my house, and he was there. That's the type of guy he was. He was a jack of all trades. He sold cars. He sold used furniture. He sold glassware. He was an auctioneer. And he could buy a $200 car and sell it for $1,500. I mean, he was just that type of guy that could do it. He always had a great big wallet. Ted tormented him to death. His wallet was always real thick. He loved to have a lot of money in it and whatever. But anyway, he was not saved. He was not saved. The bottom line. And when I started coming to Beach Fork, of course, then I realized how important salvation was. His mom, which I call her old grandma, she was a saint. She was one of the best women that ever walked the planet. She prayed for him and his siblings, I'm sure, daily, but he just never saw the need to get saved. So when he got cancer in 1995, I thought, boy, here we go. Because he had waited so long, he had a lot of pain, but he was stubborn, and he wouldn't go to the hospital, or he wouldn't go to the doctor. So when he was diagnosed, he said, you have about 4 to 6 months to live. You might stretch out a couple months if you get chemotherapy. So of course that was a blow, and we were all suffering in the thought of losing him. Especially my mom, who really leaned on her dad more than her mom. And Of course, it didn't mean he needs to be saved. He just has to be saved. So, of course, we all started praying. I brought the request to the church. And I know my old grandma's prayers were stored up. I know she had prayed. Anyway, I knew, to me, I don't know why, because I was a young Christian at that time, but I looked at it spiritually. And I said, God, I know I've never been able to get his attention, but I know this is going to, okay? So, use this suffering for good. He needs to be saved. No matter what, he needs to be saved. So, we started praying, and our faithful Brown brothers, James Ray, Freddie, and Carl Brown, one day, they called Mom, and they said, can we go see your dad? And Mom said, well, sure. So, my grandma had gone to the Church of God for years. Johnny Mitchell's wife, my grandma, and then old grandma too, had gone to the Church of God. Very dry, dead church. It's not an age to say it, that's just the truth. And he never had a drawing to go there, ever. Anyway, Carl, James, Ray, Freddie come to my grandma and grandpa's house, and we were there. And they just talked to him, and my grandpa had known them through the years, and he got saved that day at his house. He made a decision then. He said, I'm going to go to church as much as I can. Of course, we kind of warned him about beach work because he had never, I say he'd never seen anything like it. I don't think he had. He'd never shared that he had. But, I said, it's not, I think he'd gone to Church of God a couple times and said, Grandpa, it's not Church of God. We're going to shout. There'll be people running the pews. You just don't know what you're going to see. Well, he absolutely loved it. But he said, I wish I would have done this years ago. Yeah. He did one chemotherapy treatment. It absolutely about killed him, and he said, no more. He said, I want to live out my days with a quality of life and not quantity. He said, I want to make sure that I get to go to church. And then, as he was hearing the preaching and everything, he said, I need to get baptized. Well, he was so sick. I don't, if you guys remember, but one day out here in the creek, he made the decision to get baptized. And anyway, just wonderful, wonderful feeling of knowing he was headed for heaven. I worried about his future home, and he made it. I know he did. He suffered here on earth for those few months. My goodness, he was so bad there the last couple of months. It was torture. It was awful. He was suffering. We were suffering watching him suffer. I never will forget. I don't even have this in my notes, but he was craving a corned beef sandwich, and of all things, and I was bound to determine I was going to get him one some way or another, and I got him one, and that night he was so sick. It made him so sick, and I hated it, but I got him what he wanted. I was bound to determine I was going to do anything I could to get him what he wanted, and but suffering made him make a move that I just don't think he would have otherwise. I just don't think he would have. And I worried, I told my mom, and it's hard for her to think about it. But, I said he could have got killed in a car wreck, and we wouldn't have known.
Right.
So we have to hold on to God worked gloriously through suffering. Suffering wasn't God's plan, of course. He wanted and created perfection, but man messed that up pretty quick. Man chose evil, and boy, aren't we seeing that today. Therefore, we ended up with sin, suffering, and shame. But we have to realize, and I believe that that's why we are present in church today. If we didn't believe this, we wouldn't be here. Suffering is not our future if we are saved.
Yeah.
Suffering will come to an end and perfection will resume. But until then, we need to realize that Christians are not exempt. Sometimes we get the woe is me attitude. Everyone suffers, whether it's physically, mentally, or financially. Everyone. So we've all done it. We've all got the woe is me attitude. I mean, it's just, why me? Why am I going through this? We don't deserve this. Why? Well, God's using it for good some way or another. And we may not see it. And we may not understand until maybe future generations might not understand. Dorothy may not know why she went through what she did, but maybe future generations will say, remember when Mama went through that? We need to be saved because we know that God brought Mama through. We don't know why. We just don't understand. But we know that all things work together for good. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely. On account of me, rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. That's Matthew 5:11 and 12. So we're going to get accused falsely. People are going to say evil about us. People run our names through the mud sometimes just to try to attack you and make you suffer. It's happened. I know people, it's happening. It's happened to my family. People have drug our name through the mud just to make you look bad. That's suffering. God will use that for good when you do not act like a fool about it. Sometimes you just have to step back. There's times I feel like we have to fight and we have to stand up for what's right, but sometimes saying nothing at all is your better bet. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed in us. That's Romans 8:18. Is any among you suffering? Let him pray. James 5:13. So I think God, no matter what, He wants to use our suffering for us to get closer to Him, for us to maybe do something for Him. We have to use the suffering for good. God uses suffering for His higher purposes. 2 Corinthians 1:3-7, and this is basically verse 4. Who God comforts us in all our afflictions, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction. Who better to comfort someone than someone who has already experienced the pain? I can't really comfort someone who's lost a dad or mom because I've not been there yet, thankfully. But someone who's lost a mom, Tommy can comfort them. Different ones can comfort. When you know how you feel. I can't comfort really someone who has a child with cystic fibrosis. But Lynn can. Did I say that right? CP, okay, I'm sorry. Lynn can. Lynn knows what it's like to have a child who they can handle up till age, 17, 18, and then once he's a grown man, how are they handling him? How are they going to be able to take care of him? I don't have a clue about that, but Lynn and Eric know. So, everyone, I believe, when we go through things, then you're able to go to someone and say, hey, we're caring for our mother and father, and we know what it's like. We know what a struggle that is, and what a hardship it is, and how mentally draining it is, or whatever. We can help you. We can pray for you. I think we can pray better for people when we know the circumstance.
Right.
Let's see. Philippians 1:12. Now I want you to know, brethren, that my circumstances have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel. Paul wrote that while he was in prison. Can you imagine? I can't imagine sitting in prison saying, oh, I know this is all just going to work for the glory of God. How I just can't imagine. God allowed him to see the higher purpose. Now you can ask Ted, and I try to be very positive. I just can't be a Debbie Downer. I am upbeat. I will spend anything for the good. That's just the way I try to do with Ted and Easton both. If they come home and car sales aren't good, I'm like, yes, but did you have a good day? Or what'd you eat for dinner? Or whatever. I just try to make it like, let's see how we can spend the day and make it better. Because sometimes we look at, we didn't do this, we couldn't do this. Well, what did you get to accomplish? What did you do? but I feel like being positive is a better choice if you can be. But Paul being in prison helped the gospel penetrate Caesar's guard. And everywhere in Philippians 1:13 and 14, and preachers were preaching more boldly due to Paul's suffering. So they knew Paul's in prison, and we're going to preach this even harder. We're going to preach the gospel even harder and make people aware of what and who we're serving. The glory revealed to us will be far greater than the sufferings we have to endure here. Romans 8:18. It's really easy, when I think about Kathy and Mary all the time telling this story, when they were kids, of course, back in the 70s, a lot of cars didn't have air conditioning, but they were embarrassed to ride in their mom and dad's car that didn't have air conditioning. So when they would go to town from Mineral Springs, about a 7-mile drive, they'd roll the windows up, or they'd roll the windows down while they're driving from country to town. But Ted and Johnny have said when they got to town, they'd roll those windows up. Of course, Johnny's a little bit younger, but they'd roll those windows up, and they would pretend like they had air conditioning because they were embarrassed that they didn't have air conditioning. So Ted said we'd all just be dying, just burning up. Mary and Kathy, trying to make them happy, so they had their hair would they try to get it to blow and everything else. It was funny. When I hear the story, it's just hilarious. But they were embarrassed to be riding in and it probably wasn't a junky car, but it was just a car without air conditioning. They were embarrassed because a lot of their friends had air conditioning. But if, looking at that, if you know that, hey, I'm driving an old junker now, but in a year from now, when I get a better job, I can get a better car. That makes it a little easier, okay? I put on here, we can get a brand new Chevy truck, okay? Like we know, of course, Dad sells Chevy, so I had to put that plug in. But it makes it a whole lot easier. If you're driving an old Chevy beat-up truck, but and a year from now, you're going to have enough money saved for a down payment, then it makes it just a little bit easier to sacrifice and be embarrassed. Sickness is a whole lot easier to deal with if the doctor says, hey, I know this stinks right now, but if you go through 6 weeks of treatment, you're going to be 100%. Then you might be able to suck it up and deal with that 6 weeks of terrible time, maybe, knowing that you have good days ahead. So, who better than us? We know what we've got to look forward to. Thank the Lord, the Bible tells us that Jesus is coming back. So, He's going to right all the wrongs. He's going to give us a new body, a home in heaven, if we live for Him. If we truly know we're saved, we're bearing all the suffering and the afflictions in this world, but He's bearing them for us, and we know that we're making it to a home if we're saved. A beautiful heavenly home if we're saved. We have to realize that God has promised to destroy all suffering, pain, and death. And that's just, it's a hard concept to grasp. Because where we live, we live in a time of suffering and pain and death, and it's hard to see past that sometimes. But the Bible says, God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall no longer be any death. There shall no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The former things have passed away, and that's Revelation 21:4. So we have a lot to look forward to. I believe that heaven, I don't think we can comprehend it, to be honest. I don't think we can grasp it. We are going to suffer here, but we have so much to look forward to. We know in the Bible there are many people who suffered. Job, perfect example for those who suffered. He suffered ridicule from his wife, scorning from his friends, loss of his property, the death of his children, the loss of his influence, and the loss of his health. Couldn't lose much more. But God called Job a perfect man and one who hated evil. So no matter what, Job said, I want to serve God. No matter what, I'm losing everything I have, but I'm serving God. Paul, no one suffered more than Apostle Paul. But he said, be followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. That's 1 Corinthians 11:11. We've all seen it on TV. There's a type of Christianity that preaches health, wealth, and prosperity. And if Paul would have lived now, he could have just sent $20 in and said, here, Paul, everything's going to be great. Well, that's just not the way it works. It just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. It'd be great if it did. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be great if we could say, here's $20, just make me feel better. But no, we're suffering in the case for Christ, really, in the cause for Christ. It was very prominent in the Bible, all the suffering. There was major giants in the Bible. Jesus, why hast thou forsaken me? That's what he said when he was hanging on the cross. He suffered physically, mentally. But what did he do for us? He died for us. So, we're not the only ones that suffered. Everybody suffered. But even people in the Bible suffered. So, let this be our takeaway. Let's realize that God is at work in our lives. He causes all things, not just one isolated incident, to work together for good. That doesn't mean we have to like it, but we have to know that God has us. We have to know that. If you have to write yourself a note and keep it in your wallet, pull it out every day and look at it. No matter what, God has me. I may suffer. I may hurt. I may hurt financially. I may hurt physically, mentally, whatever. God has you. Most people don't sit down and eat raw eggs. I know I've known a few people who do that, but I can't stand a lot of it. We don't eat plain flour. Ted has done that a couple times, so him and Ethan both kind of like the taste of raw, like plain flour, and I don't know. I married a weird one sometimes, guys. Yesterday evening, just side note, he came in with a plate full of oats. Dry oats, and he just put some sugar on top. He said, I'm trying something different, oats and sugar. I said, not cooked, like just oats? And he ate that whole plate full of oats.
As a church.
Whatever floats your boat. After you're married 30 or 40 years, just eat it, Ted. I don't care. He liked it. I mean, Kathy married before he started that car. But anyway, I hope nobody eats just a teaspoon of salt by itself, because that would, I don't think I could pull that off. But when we throw all that together with a couple eggs, sugar, milk, and vanilla, we get a nice big cake. There might be a couple other ingredients there too. So, need a little this, and it comes together and makes a nice big 2-layer cake. Throw some icing on that, and it's beautiful. Well, that's just like our lives. God is using a little of this. Let's throw a little dash of this in here. Let's whip this up and beat it real good. And in the end, that produces us getting ready for heaven. We are a child of God. We're putting that all together in our lives. And some way or another, it ends up being this big, beautiful 2 or 3 layer cake. And that's just like our lives. He's using all things for good when it comes together. Romans 8:29 tells us that God's main purpose in our life is to be Christ-like. All ingredients that God sprinkles in our lives, whether we see it for good or bad, are necessary. All things work together for good.
Absolutely. Good.